All right. Whoa. Okay, that's really loud. Perfect. Welcome to United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey. We are once again back here on a lovely Saturday with a wind squall blowing through in Ginny Jump State Park here in Hope, New Jersey. Uh, so, while I give some people time to wander on down, find their seats, I know we have a scouting group or something out over there. So, to give them time to settle in, I do want to welcome you all, not only those who joined us here on site, but also who are joining us online. Because that's right, we do live stream these to YouTube and Twitch. So, if you're ever looking for something to do on a Saturday night and you can't make it up here, you can always join us there and say hi and chat. So, you can also check us out on our website, uacnj.org. It's where you're going to find a list of all our upcoming talks, all our past talks, with links to those past talks that we keep on YouTube. You'll also find information on all our member clubs, because we are, in fact, a club made up of other clubs. And one of the best ways to actually get involved with astronomy is to actually join your local club, because it's the easiest access. In addition, you could check us out on our social media pages. That is our Facebook, our Instagram. We have a Discord server for all the younger kids who would like to join us, who know about that. All things that I check frequently for comments, and so if you have any questions, whether it be, hey, I want to share my latest astrophotography photo, or even just questions about, what telescope you might be wanting, or, hey, I got a telescope and I can't figure out why I can't see anything through it, do feel free to contact and ask us there. All right. So it looks like we got most people settled in, I think. Hold on. Sorry, I figured it was better not to scream in people's ears. But I do want to get started on the safety briefing. As the people here have been noticing, we do have a little bit of weather going on. We have a short wind squall. If it gets too bad, we will just get up and file inside. We checked the radar. It really is just supposed to blow rather quickly over us and be gone. So we should be okay. If not, you will hear me come on the speaker and we will process inside. All right. So since they look like they're happily ensconced up there, if you need to use the restroom, that is the porta potty in the back to my left, your right. We also have a gift shop and museum area. Feel free to check out. It's giving me attitude with the wind. Unfortunately, I can't be in two places at once, and I usually run the sales desk in there. So if you need anything from there, you will have to wait till after the presentation. That being said, we do have a number of scopes that probably, once this wind dies down and there's no more random droplets of water, it's not raining, it's just occasionally like, it got me. They'll likely roll the roofs open on the couple of scopes we did have open, and a volunteer is running them. Do listen to their instructions, and we should be able to see things, I think, as long as the cloud cover keeps moving that way. When we go to leave, we are using our headlights. We do not like getting run over. It is far too much paperwork, and no one needs those medical bills. So in avoiding that, using our headlights when we leave. On the same token, if we're walking around, we are keeping those flashlights and other lights pointed towards the ground. because we don't need to accidentally blind people while having a flashlight rave. Um, People laugh usually because that has actually happened, where it's like, my eyeballs. They make really bright flashlights. And with that, so question and answer session will be at the end, because otherwise we will get very off topic into the weeds and not get to the point. So with that, you're not here to hear me blabber on. You're here to listen to Mark Sproul's presentation on George Hale. Yeah, I forgot his middle name, which apparently is Ellery. But Mark Sproul has a Bachelor in Science degree in Computer Engineering from Rutgers School of Engineering and a Master's degree in Mechanical Engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology. He works on embedded computer systems, specializing in low-level image processing. His interest in astronomy started in the early 1990s, writing software to read and display image data from NASA Voyager, Viking, and Magellan space probe missions. He has built his own observatory, which he's given talks about, so if you're interested, do check that out. We actually have that presentation on our YouTube, and he works on large observatories with someone else now, who I forget. But with that, here's Mark. And are you...
Hello, 1, 2, there we go. Hello, good evening. We got a lot more people coming in. Okay, tonight's talk coming through. Okay, tonight's talk is on George Ellery Hale. He's my hero, in my opinion. Hopefully, I will convince you tonight as well. He is the most significant astronomer of the 20th century, and tonight my goal is to explain to you why. I know you've probably never heard of it. Has anybody ever heard of Hale? Besides my wife. She doesn't count. All right, as she said about me, computer engineer. I've been writing software for 48 years. I still love it. I'm pretty good at it, I think. I make good money at it, so it must be pretty good. I'm a member here. I'm a member in NJAA. I'm the president of NWJAA, one of our club members, and I write lots of software. Okay, who is George Ellery Hale? Have any of you heard of the Great Chicago Fire? Okay, the Chicago Fire happened. Chicago burned down and was the first city to build up as a high-rise. And there was a gentleman, George Hale's father, who built and sold elevators and became very rich as Chicago rebuilt. So Hale came from a rich family. He was interested in astronomy and started doing solar astronomy. His legacy and why I think he's so important is 4 times he went to really rich people and said, how would you like to have your name on the world's largest telescope? And he did that 4 times. And that's what we're going to be talking about, the 4 telescopes that he built that made it possible for what we do today. All right, this is a quote from Wikipedia. American solar astronomer, best known for his discoveries of magnetic fields in sunspots, and key feature leader in developing these telescopes, as I said. Also, he founded the field of astrophysics, and he did a lot of his own work in solar astronomy. But again, his key to fame is that he built these observatories. And this is a quote from the Mount Wilson Institute about him. His support, again, saying the same thing about building these observatories. Okay, he was very sick as a child. He kind of developed a little bit late, which kind of actually worked to his benefit. He was married, had 2 children, and I have had the honor of meeting his grandson, who's a child, the child of William Ellery Hale. And he suffered from a lot of neurology problems. They called them back then demons. We would call it today depression and nervous breakdowns. But I believe in all the stuff that I've read, it was because of the pressure he put on himself to perform. Started at MIT at 17, so he's very smart. He spent a lot of time at Harvard. He worked on a doctorate degree but never finished it. And he was a professor at University of Chicago. As I said, He was born. Excuse me. That's what happens when you try to talk and have allergies at the same time. As I said, he was born and raised in Chicago. So the four great telescopes he built was Yerkes in north of Chicago as part of University of Chicago, where he was a professor. The 60-inch reflector at Mount Wilson, the 100-inch reflector at Mount Wilson, and the 200-inch reflector at Palomar. I've been to all of these except for the one at Yerkes, the 40-inch. So the timeline, he was born in 1868. Yerkes came online in 1897. Yerkes to this day is still the largest refractor telescope. 1904 Mount Wilson, 1908 the 60-inch, 1917 those two are very close together, and then a big gap to 1949 for the 200-inch. The 200-inch, by the way, is still in use in science today. So the first person he went to was a gentleman named Yerkes, and he did basically what he said he would do. He made Yerkes famous. Yerkes would be a nobody if it weren't for his name on this telescope. He was probably involved with what we call today the mafia. He was originally from New York City, went to Chicago, did a lot of shady deals. He eventually got run out of town, but he donated the $400,000 to build the observatory. So the observatory is located at Williams Bay, Wisconsin, which is about a 2-hour drive north of Chicago. And these are some pictures of the observatory. It is an absolutely beautiful building. Oh, am I standing in the way? Thank you. Figure out where to stand. But it had some very serious problems. It was built out of stone, and it was built not at elevation. They didn't realize this back then. Yeah, we moved it in because of the rain. Thank you. And when you have a lot of stone, during the day it absorbs heat, and at night it gives off that heat. So they had a lot of problems with distortion of the images. But still, it was a very successful observatory. Again, as I said, it was the largest refractor ever made. The floor in this raises and lowers 26 feet. As you can see, there's a staircase over here on the side. You can see that's quite large. This picture shows the objective, the lens. And part of the problem why we haven't made anything larger is you can only support that at the edges. And the weight of the lens and the weight of the glass just becomes too great to be able to support it only on the edges. A mirror you can support anywhere in the middle, in the edges and the back, because you don't have to go through. But a lens, you have to have the light to go through, so you can only support it on the edges. And that's why there has never been a larger telescope made. I will talk about one in a little bit about the one that might be made. Again, it's a very beautiful facility, a lot of stonework, a lot of beautiful architecture in the building, stuff that we would never do today. This is the large dome. Again, you can see the detail. And the inside of the building, I'm hoping to go there this summer. It is open to the public. So if you're in the north of Chicago area, I recommend you go visit it. Yerkes was the birthplace of astrophysics. Prior to 1897, prior to Hale being involved in all this, all astronomers did was, where are the stars? How did astronomy start? Why was astronomy a thing in the first place? It was for navigating ships, for telling time. All they cared about was position of the stars and cataloging the stars so that when you're at sea, you could figure out where you were and know all this stuff. They didn't care about what happens in the stars. And Hale started the field of astrophysics. He was interested in stars. What is the closest star we can look at and study? The sun. It's a star. We don't call it a star, we call it the sun, but it's a star. And he spent his time that he was doing research on solar work. Still the largest refractor in the world, no longer used for science. There was a 48-inch made in Paris that was horizontal, never pointed at the sky. They used mirrors. It was never used for science. It was financially unsuccessful and failed, and they took it apart. I found out today, in fact, a project that I've known about has been awarded to Magdalena Ridge in Magdalena, New Mexico, where they're going to build, I think it's a 70-inch refractor for solar work. It will not move. It'll be pointing straight down the ground, but there will be a larger refractor than Yerkes. Over 100 years before they made one bigger, but it's strictly for solar work. Okay, stay behind the line. Okay, the next one he did was Mount Wilson. So at Yerkes, he built a solar observatory that was donated by a lady named Snow, and he moved it to Mount Wilson in 1804 to study the sun. He then started looking for money. And as I said, he went to really rich people and said, how would you like to have your name on the world's largest telescope? And his next victim was Andrew Carnegie. And I'm sure everybody's heard of Carnegie Mellon and Carnegie. Born in 1835 in Scotland, and he was in charge of steel. He donated, and I forget how much money, but he donated the money for the 60-inch at Mount Wilson. And this is where it is located, just north and east of Los Angeles. And a lot of these pictures coming up are pictures I've taken personally. This is the sign at the entry to Mount Wilson, founded in 1904, the Mount Wilson Institute. And I mentioned earlier that I met Hale's grandson, and Hale's grandson is now the honorary president of the Mount Wilson Observatory Institute. And this is the view looking out over the mountains. It's absolutely gorgeous up there. Am I in your way? You probably can't see through me. So the Snow telescope, solar telescope, again, Hale's personal research was all solar. It was moved from Yerkes to Mount Wilson, and the first observatory out there. And what it was done, it was horizontally, and they had a mirror that tracked the sun to keep the light into the telescope. So the telescope itself didn't move, the mirror moved. And this is what it looked like. And it's still there today. I've been inside of it. It's no longer used, it's no longer set up, but it is there. What they then did was they built two vertical, because they had problems with the heat, they built vertical things. The taller one is 150 feet tall. And it again has a celiostat, a mirror that tracks the sun and reflects the light down 150 feet, and then another 70 feet into the ground to a mirror and comes back up to a table. And this is what it looks like at the top. And you see that any good? This is the mirror, and that's a guy standing there, and that mirror will track the sun and point the light down into this pit. There's another look at it. And this is what the table looks like for the research. So this is the light coming down through here, goes down into there, and it gets reflected up on this table. And the sun on that table is about this big around, and they can then photograph it. And what they used to do is they put a piece of paper on it, and they would trace out the sunspots by hand. And they still do that today. There's a retired gentleman that still, every day it's sunny up there, he goes up there and he does that. So they have these records back to 1904. So in 2019, I happened to have the opportunity to spend a week at Mount Wilson. This is a far less impressive telescope. It's a 6-inch Warner Swayze telescope that was installed in 1909. But I had the opportunity to use it for a week. Got to stay out there on premise in what they called the monastery, which is where the astronomers used to live. It was called a monastery because it was men only. And I got to stay there and use this telescope. And this telescope is very unique in that everybody's seen a grandfather clock, right? And how the mechanism works? Well, the mechanism to track the stars in this telescope is almost identical to a grandfather clock mechanism. It's mechanical. It's a clock mechanism. We call it a mechanical clock drive. And I'm sure you can't see it in the picture. In the next picture? No, you can't. But it's in the base is this clock drive, and you can look into it and see, just like you're looking at a grandfather clock, the mechanism. That's pretty cool. And yes, it has weights, just like a grandfather clock, to drive it. So these are some pictures I took with that telescope while I was there at Mount Wilson. nothing special, just a moon. But with that old telescope, that telescope that was installed in 1909, I got to use that and take pictures with it. So also, he founded Caltech. And I imagine most of you have heard of Caltech. Caltech is of the MIT of the West. So there was a college, it was actually a prep school called Throop College. It was a prep and vocational school. That was just local, just a little small college, and he became a trustee of it, and he transformed that into Caltech. So Hale is basically the founder of Caltech. In 1920, it became California Institution of Technology, which is pretty famous these days. Here's information about the 60-inch. I just threw the 6-inch because I got to use that, and that was pretty cool. The mirror weighed 1,900 pounds. That's nothing compared to Palomar. 7.5 inches thick, 24 meters, f/16 for those of you who know what that means. And the mirror was purchased by his father. Remember, his father was rich, and gave it to him. It was made in Europe, and gave it to him as a gift to help his career. And it sat around for like 30 years before he finally did something with it. Again, these are pictures I've taken. That's the dome of the 60-inch. This is the telescope itself. Quite complicated. This is where you look through it. So it's a Cassegrain style. The light comes down, hits the mirror, comes up here to a second mirror, comes down here to a third mirror, and then out the side. It is still operational, but not used for science. And you can go out there, I think it's $1,500 for a night. You can go there, anybody can go rent it for a night. The 100-inch is $5,000 for a whole night or $2,500 for half a night. And what they do is groups of 20 people will throw in money and they'll go rent it. I've been able to use both of them, and I didn't have to pay for it. So just some more pictures of the 60-inch. Again, most of these pictures are pictures I took myself. One thing you've got to understand is I'm an engineer. I like building things. I'm actually more involved like the building and the mechanics of it than actually doing the astronomy. So this picture, to me, is really impressive. To some of you, it might not. This is the gearing mechanism underneath everything that makes it rotate. The same as the gears I have in my telescope, but mine are about this big, not this big. But it's the same concept, and they're really quite impressive. You can't see in the picture, but down here at the bottom, there's a worm that drives that. It's a worm gear. This one, Harlow Shapley, is another very important person back in that area, and allowed Harlow Shapley to determine that the sun was not the center of our galaxy as was commonly thought. So they were able to use this telescope to make some pretty significant discoveries. Then along comes Hooker, another rich guy, and he said, build the 100-inch and send me the bill. And he was vice president of Ironworks, had lots of money, and later on he became very jealous and hateful of Hale, because Hale was a very educated, sophisticated person, and Hooker's wife was also educated, sophisticated, like poetry and things like that. And Hale and his wife got along great. They never had any affair or anything. They just hung out socially, and Hooker got very annoyed about it. So the 100-inch Hooker telescope, the mirror, like remember we said the first one was 1,900 pounds. This one's 4.5 tons. That's 9,000 pounds. So from 1,900 we go to 9,000 pounds. And the world largest from 1917 to 1949. And in 1949, we'll get to that, the Palomar came online. Again, Hooker paid for the majority of it, the building the telescope, and Carnegie paid for the building and the rest of the stuff. And this is the 100-inch. Now, the next picture, the next picture is a better picture. This picture I didn't take. One thing to note in this picture, this is what's called an English fork. It's got a mount here and a mount there, and the telescope tilts. This telescope cannot look at the North Star. It cannot come all the way down. So you are limited, but it gives you an easier mount because it's mounted on both ends. The 60-inch was only mounted on one end, but it didn't weigh as much. They had to do this. This was important when they came to the design of the 200-inch, which we'll get to in a little bit. This is the original control panel of the 100-inch. Not in use anymore. Actually, the computer on the left is in use. The stuff on the right was the original stuff, which is no longer in use. And another very good picture of the telescope. Can you see through me okay? And this is the dome of the 100-inch. You can see down there at the very bottom a door down here to get an idea of scale of how big it really is. And this is a diagram again showing the size of it. There's no people in that picture, so you can't really get a good idea there. And back then, roads were not like they are today. Trucks were not like they are today. This is a picture of getting it up the hill, getting the mirror. That's the mirror going up the hill with some kind of a jalopy truck. And a lot of stuff was taken up by mule train. Really, actual mules pulling the stuff up the mountain. Okay. Probably one of the really good things that Hale did. Who's heard of Hubble? Who hasn't heard of Hubble? Nobody. Well, Hale is the one that hired Hubble. And Hubble used the 100-inch telescope, and that's what he used to become famous. So without Hale, Hubble, we wouldn't know the name Hubble. So again, this is why I think Hale is so important. He made these instruments so that these scientists could do the discoveries that he did. Shapley made discoveries, Hubble made discoveries, and countless others made discoveries with the equipment. Hale, on his own right, made some significant discoveries on the sun. Not stuff that we hear about every day. Magnetism. You don't learn that in high school that, okay, this person discovered magnetism. Okay, just the sun has magnetism, and you take it for granted. So it wasn't anything significant like what Hubble did. Hubble is the one that Hubble, and I mentioned Shapley before, there were two schools of thought in the 1920s. One was we had our universe, our galaxy, and that's all there was. And there were these fuzzy things out the edge that they called nebula. They didn't know what they were, but they were just fuzzy blobs. And it was the 100-inch Hubble using, which we'll get to in a minute, to take these pictures and determine that's a galaxy, not just some fuzzy blob. So here's Hubble on the 100-inch. And here's a list of things done with the 100-inch. Hubble exclusively proves the Andromeda Nebula to be an external to the Milky Way and its own galaxy. Hubble and Humason confirmed that the universe was expanding. Fritz Zwicky found, who's heard of dark matter, he discovered the first evidence of dark matter. Nicholson discovered more satellites around Jupiter. And Bader, what did Bader do? Stellar population, discovery of different types of Cepheids. Cepheids are the stars we use to judge distance. So this is Hubble's famous image. It's a picture of Andromeda Galaxy. And up here in the corner, there was a star. And VAR means variable. And the way we discover and judge distances of things is Cepheid variables are what we use as a candlestick. About their rate that they blink is directly proportional to the brightness, which allows us to determine their distance. At that time, we believed our galaxy to be around, our galaxy to be about 100,000 light years across, which is about correct. So if Andromeda Nebula is 1 million light years away, it can't be part of our galaxy. And that's what he was able to prove. And Shapley was of the belief that it was just this fuzzy blob out the edge and that our galaxy was all there was. And Shapley got the notice about Hubble's discovery and said, I'm done for, I'm wrong. And of course, was quite disappointed, but it was one of those things that you had two different schools of thought, but nobody had proof one way or the other. And Hubble came up with that proof, and that's why he's famous. Now, take that same image and make it into a positive. So it's the exact same image, but now make it instead of a negative. And this picture was taken by the 100-inch Hubble in 1923. And this picture was taken by me with a 3-inch telescope in 2020. Which one looks better? That's what we can do today. We can do today with that telescope that I took that with was $500, and I had a $1,000 camera on it. So $1,500 total. I can do better than what Hubble did. And so can you. This is a picture from Mount Wilson looking out over the LA basin. It's kind of like light pollution. The week that I was out there, it was really this was the last night that I was there. The rest of the week, there had been cloud cover below the top of the mountain. So we saw none of this. So the lights were blocked. On the last night, we had all the light pollution. But the rest of the week, it was all suppressed, so it was really pretty cool. Excuse me. Okay. Now we go to the big one. In astronomy, bigger is better. The 200-inch. The 200-inch, now called the Hale telescope, is in Palomar, California, and it was the last one that he did. It was not finished when he died, but it was being built and was making good progress. So again, he went to somebody rich, and I'm sure everybody's heard of Rockefeller. So born in 1839, died 1937, grew up poor, controlled 90% of the oil, and was the richest person in America. He donated $6 million to build Palomar. And Palomar that's San Diego down at the bottom, and it's north of San Diego. And this picture gives you a good idea of California. We got Mexico down there, San Diego, Palomar's there, Mount Wilson's there, there's Los Angeles. Again, these I mentioned earlier about Mount Wilson, Yerkes was at low level, near humid, and had problems with seeing because of the stone and such. They learned their lesson. These observatories are high up on mountains, 5,700 feet up. Mount Wilson's 5,700, and I think Palomar is 6,000 feet, but up high. Nothing compared to Hawaii today at 14,000, but for the time, it was very high. 200 inches, 17 feet, 5 meters. Focal length is 55 feet. It's an f3.3 for those with G110 telescopes, so it's a very fast telescope. The moving mass, the mount, the part that moves, 450 tons. And if you disengage the drive system and turn on the lubrication system, supposedly you can move it with a finger. So the whole thing, the telescope and everything, is 1.2 million pounds. So they started the design in 1928, and it wasn't finished until 1949. And that's what the telescope looks like. So remember I made the comment about the 100-inch, you couldn't look at the North Star? That was an important thing that they considered in the design of this. This is called a horseshoe yoke. This is the bearing surface that rides on this, and see that slot down there? It looks like a horseshoe. The telescope can pivot all the way down there and look straight north. The framework. The telescope, the mechanical part, wasn't built that far from here. It was built in Philadelphia and then transported via ship via the Panama Canal, and then taken up, like I showed you the other picture, up the mountain with mules and old trucks. There were a lot of new developments. Fused quartz. They tried to make the mirror out of fused quartz. General Electric spent $600,000 trying to make a mirror and failed. In the end, they went with Pyrex because they failed, but they developed it, and we have today fused quartz mirrors. The thing when you're making a mirror, you want the mirror to not have expansion. And if any of you have ever used Pyrex cookware, it doesn't expand. You can stick it in the microwave, and you can stick it in the oven, and it's not going to break. Regular glass, you stick it in the oven, it's going to break. Pyrex has a lower coefficient of expansion. Fused quartz is even better, but they just never could make one that big. Assyria Trust we'll get to in a minute, And oil bearings, that big bearing surface, they use pressurized oil to create a thin film to allow it to move. And I was just talking about fused quartz. They spent $600,000 and never succeeded, but it was good development. You know, the science did develop. And they went with Pyrex. The Serrier truss, and young engineer named Mark Serrier, when you have a telescope like that, you've got the front end and the back end, and that much weight, 450 tons, it's going to sag. And if you got one side sag different than the other, you get distortion. It doesn't work. And he developed this truss system called a Serrier truss, which is still used today, where you get the balances, and these pieces are, you know, you've got a center section like this that is rigid, and then the diameters and lengths of these are proportional to the weight, and gives it so that when it does sag, they sag in parallel, and you don't get distortion. That horseshoe, that's men standing on that horseshoe. Give you an idea how big that is. Again, that was built down in Philadelphia shipyards. Huge amounts of steel. The mirror, my uncle happened to work for Corning Glass up in Corning, New York. Not that time frame, but the mirror was made in Corning, New York. Corning Glass, they're the inventors of Pyrex. And this is a picture of the pouring of the mirror. So they melted down on the glass, they put it in a form, and then they had to take a year to cool down. They had to keep it heated and slowly reduce the heat like half a degree or 1 degree per day. From 1900 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 degree per day over a year down, otherwise it would crack. And it was shipped by train with steel plates on it because they were afraid of people taking pot shots at it. Because there were some religious fanatics that considered, oh no, you're going to look at in the eye of God. You can't do that. And then it took 13 years to polish it. You got a piece of glass. You got to put a curve on it. The glass originally weighed 20 tons. Polishing, they removed 5 tons of glass. And the polishing compound that they use is, think of the finest sandpaper you can buy. It's like that. So it takes a lot of time. This is the test jig for testing it. They would work on a flat. They'd have to tilt it up vertical to test it, lay it back down. And here's some people in front of it to give an idea of the size. Another important thing to understand is the first one that they made failed. You see all those little pocket holes in them? The mold had ceramic pieces down in the bottom of it to reduce the weight, just to take up space so that there wasn't as much glass. And when they poured the first one, some of those broke loose and floated to the surface and ruined the mirror. So it was a major disaster. They had to redo it. If you're ever up in Corning, New York, one of the best glass museums in the world is Corning, New York. And the centerpiece of that museum is the first one. And there's me standing in front of it. So you look and you see right here that here, there, and there, the holes aren't empty. That's where these pieces broke loose and floated up, and there's glass when there shouldn't be, which is what ruined it. And in this other picture, you can see the crack in it that developed later. But you can go up there, stand there, and you can touch that. And it's just a really, really good museum if you're up in the Corning, which isn't that far from here. It's, 4 hours, I think? Not that far away. It's a really good museum, and it's a museum that you can spend all day at. Now, they got a lot of glass work. They have glass blowing demonstrations. They have ancient glass. They have glass history. It's just a good museum. And here's some pictures of the dome. If I remember correctly, it's 135 feet in diameter and weighs 1,000 tons. Yeah. This next slide. 1,000 tons. The doors are 125 tons each. Welded steel, 135 feet high, 137 feet in diameter. And this is the inauguration ceremony when they first built it. See how many people under there. That's the same truss that I showed earlier, but look at that people. It gives you an idea of scale of size. And notice here the bottom of the telescope. That's the bottom of it. Pay attention to that for the next picture in a little bit. That's going to be important. I can't see where my arrow keys are. And here is Hubble sitting in the cage. Back then, the astronomer was responsible for keeping the telescope pointed exactly on the target, because they would have to take exposures on film for hours. And you would have a joystick, and you'd be watching through a sight glass with the crosshairs on it and watching a guide star. And if it started to drift off, you'd use this joystick to push it into place. And the astronomer had to sit there for the entire duration. It was his responsibility. It was his pictures to do it. How do we do that today? Punch the name in the computer. Tell the computer to do it. Today, astronomers don't even go to the observatory. Then they had to be there, live there, be up all night, run the equipment, freeze their asses off. Okay, I said, yes, that's a good picture. I said to pay attention to the bottom of that telescope. Well, the original bottom was here. See these things there? Those are the sides of refrigerators. That is now all the electronics attached to the bottom of it. For modern, they used to just have a simple camera. The electronics, the bays and bays electronics, they have a hose that's 2 inches. We'll see in a little bit. 2 inches diameter that runs up there. That runs coolant, antifreeze, like in your car, to keep the electronics cold. This is some pictures of the truss tubes, the mounting tube. I did not get the opportunity to, but a friend of mine did. You can see here a ladder. You can actually climb up inside of that. That's how big it is. Big enough for somebody big as me to climb up in there and climb up a ladder. Another picture of the bottom. And this is me up inside that cage on the bottom of the telescope. But yes, I got a backroom tour of it. And up through here, and I was tall enough I could reach up and I actually touched the mirror. This gold thing there, at the time that was a spectrograph, a cool spectrograph. And there's those yellow coolant tubes I mentioned that go up there so they can cool the electronics and keep electronics cooled that are needed. Final chapter. Hale died 11 years before it was done. A few days before the death, he made the comment, "It's a beautiful day, the sun is shining, and they're working on Palomar." He knew all the problems had been solved, the work was being done, his health was failing, he was happy, he knew it was going to be completed. He did not live to see it completed, but he knew in his mind, and he was happy that it was going to be completed. Okay, what did he do? He built the 40-inch refractor at Yerkes. He built the Mount Wilson solar telescopes. He built the 60-inch reflector at Mount Wilson. He built the 100-inch at Mount Wilson. He built the 200-inch at Palomar. He discovered magnetism of the sun. He founded the field of astrophysics. He helped create Caltech, and he hired Hubble. I think that's a pretty good resume, don't you? Okay, currently, Mount Yerkes, a couple years ago, was at risk of being torn down. University of Chicago didn't want to pay for it anymore. It was no longer useful. They wanted nothing to do with it. There was even at one point that somebody said, well, it's going to get torn down and built into condos. Fortunately, some people banded together, formed a corporation, a nonprofit corporation, and it is now back open. And it's like $70 for a tour and $175 for a nighttime tour. We get to look at this, to me, very reasonable prices, but it's open to the public. Mount Wilson, the 60 and 100-inch. If you're out in California and you have the opportunity, go to Mount Wilson. If you're going to go to Mount Wilson or Palomar, I strongly suggest go to Mount Wilson because it's got museums and a whole lot more to see. Palomar, you can walk there. There's a small museum and a gift shop. And you can walk up to there and you can walk in the bottom and look through a glass window and see the telescope. But that's all there is. At Mount Wilson, you can go in both the big telescopes. You can there's a lot of different telescopes, and there's a museum, and there's places to walk around. There's a restaurant. There's or it's an outdoor little cafe thing. But there's a lot to do there, and they have tours every few hours. The 200-inch is still in use. Again, you can go see it, but the 100-inch and the 60-inch, like I said earlier, you can go and rent it. And I had the opportunity, the 100-inch. Another guy, the member that's here, he rented it for half a night, and invited a bunch of people, and I happened to be one of the people there. And when I was there with another gentleman using that 6-inch, when the 60-inch was in use, we just got to kind of go in and kind of tag along with the other people and got to go do it for free because the friend that took me out there is friends with the director. So we kind of had some interesting stuff. Recommended reading, The Perfect Machine. This book is basically what really got me hooked. In 1995, I was headed to New Zealand, and I stopped in California for a couple days, and I went to Palomar, and this book had just come out. And I bought it, and I read it on the plane when I was headed to New Zealand. And it's all about building it. And this is one of the things that really got me inspired in astronomy. It's a good book. It's easy to get on eBay. Another one is Explore the Universe. This is Hale's biography. Another very good book. And this book, as I said earlier, I'm an engineer. I like building things. And there's a quote in this book that really is near and dear to me. This is somebody said about Hale. I really begin to think that the true recipe for making a first-rate astronomer is to take an engineer and teach him some astronomy, not take an astronomer and teach him some engineering. Well, I'm an engineer, so I kind of like that statement. Another good book, Cosmic Odyssey. This is about all the discoveries that, and yes, I've read all these, all the discoveries that were made at Palomar. I mentioned briefly earlier a guy named Milton Humason. He was a mule skinner. That was somebody that ran the mule trains. He didn't graduate high school. He quit school at 8 years old to go run the mules up and down the mountain for tourists. And then he got involved in running the equipment up and down. And then he became a janitor. And he was very focused on his work. And he got hired, and he got working with Hubble. And he did a lot of the work that Hubble gets credit for. Eventually, he got an honorary doctorate degree. And a lot of the credit has been given to him. Just another really good book. Okay, and it's time for questions.
Thank you, Mark, for another great presentation. So, how question and answer session is going to work? For those of you who are here, I'm kind of like a T-Rex. My vision in the night is kind of based on movement since I've been looking at screens, monitoring online chat. So you're going to raise your hand and wave it about when I ask for questions, if you have one, and then keep your hand up until I walked and hand you the microphone. Because chances are, if you have that question, someone online or here also has that question, and I'm sure online people would like to hear what the question was. Online people, you have it easy. You get to just type. All right. Before that, I just want to do a reiteration of the safety briefing, because usually a couple people sneak in during the presentation. First off, if you need to use the restroom, that is the porta potty in the back. To my left, your right. It is illuminated by red for ease of... Oh, that's you. You're a little too far up. There we go. We're not trying to be Darth Vader. So, porta potty in the back. My left, your right. We have a little museum and gift shop area I will be manning after the question and answer session. I believe we have a telescope, the one in the red shed open. Who is going to go open that up. Oh, it's yours that has the interference. Perfect. I can fix that later. When we go to leave, we are using our headlights, people who drive, because we like not running people over or getting run over. At the same time, if we have any flashlights, as it will get dark since it is a state park, do keep those pointed towards the ground because we don't want to accidentally blind people. With that, I will start this off with our first online question, which is the Hale we're talking about here related to the
No.
Hale?
No, it is not. He's not related to the Hale-Bopp comet at all.
Okay.
I get that question often, and no, he's not. They're not the same person.
All right. And any questions out here? Oh, you forgot the move it around part. Again, movement based. I'm the T-Rex. Okay. There we go.
What year did Erwin die?
Which Irwin? Are we talking about
Hubble.
George?
You talk
Hale?
about Edwin Hubble.
Oh,
53, I think it was. '53. Born in 1889, died in 1953. That's what you're asking, correct?
yes, it was apparently. All right. So our next online question is: could the horizontal telescopes that you showed next to the vertical water tower looking telescopes, could those still be set up and used, or are they in too much of a state of disrepair?
The snow telescope is in too much of state of disrepair. It's been replaced by those two vertical ones, so there's no need to do it. The two vertical ones are still in operation, so there's no reason to bother doing that, and the heat problems were such that it really wasn't useful. They got the other vertical ones, so there's no effort,
Yep.
no reason
And when you're beyond the rope, people online can't see you. That's why.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we have to unfortunately keep you in your cage. Right, I see a question over here.
In some of these, ones that are the ones that are still in use in Mount Wilson, but have like those older parts. Like if something breaks, do they have people on hand to machine new parts for those?
Yes, they do, and it does is a problem. There's one big problem with the 100-inch, in that the bearings in it were mercury, and so a bunch of years ago they encased them entirely, and then there was an earthquake that shifted the ground, so the alignment is no longer perfect, and because the mercury bearings were encased, they can't go back in and adjust them, so its alignment is now a problem. But somebody I know is working on using the 100-inch for amateur scientific use again. So that is being done. You just can't take the long exposures like you used to. But with our modern computers, we can get away with that. It's a problem, yes, but we can overcome that with modern computer software, where you take a lot of short exposures and then adjust them and add them together. But yes, that can be a problem. In the solar telescope, there's an old PDP-8 computer, and PDP-8 computers were old when I was in college, and it doesn't work anymore. So the computer control of it, they still do the manual stuff, but the computer control stuff, and there's not money to redo it because the research money is not there, but the manual stuff they still do. So yes, it is a problem, but they normally get it resolved. It just sometimes takes time and takes volunteers.
Right, we got another question back here.
If you had to pick one of the telescopes, which one would be your favorite?
Palomar by far, because bigger is better.
Not even a hint of hesitation there.
In astronomy, we call them light buckets. The more light you can gather, the better. I've been able to use the 60-inch and the 100-inch. So if I had the opportunity to use them again, Palomar is still in use, so nobody can go use that as an amateur. So either one of them, any of them, I'd be happy with. Hell, I was happy with the 6-inch I got to use out there. So, but yes, by far the 200-inch, because bigger is better.
All right, this online question is actually a great follow-up to that. Is there a physical limit on size for optical telescopes?
Right now, there's one that's 30 meters in diameter. There's ones being proposed that are bigger. So, yeah, there's limits someplace, but
we haven't found them yet?
we haven't found them yet.
Just have to be a little more creative in design, I guess.
I have a question. Does anybody here like to read? I've got a copy of The Perfect Machine that I'll give to somebody as long as they promise to read it.
Woo! Free
Somebody-
book.
I actually have 2. I get these off eBay for $5. Who's
Yeah.
that?
One of the advantages of coming to the observatory, you can get free stuff sometimes.
My card is in there if you want to reach out to me. It's a
Oh.
like I said, that book was very inspiring to me. I've read it twice. Yeah, that's book helped really get me going as full bore as I am into astronomy. You don't want to know how much money I put into astronomy.
Right. Was there another question out here? Was that a raise your hand, or are we just swatting at mosquitoes? Because I understand the latter too. That's why bug spray is a very important part of any astronomer's equipment. Right. So, online people, I am going to put out a last call for any questions, just because by the time they hear this, we're already like 2 minutes into the future. Stream delay is a thing, so I always like to give them a little bit of time. Our next online question is, in the slide comparing the Andromeda galaxy pictures, it looks like the view of Andromeda has changed, kind of like the Saturn ring situation since the older image. Is that true? I think they're referring to that kind of looks more like rotated where it's,
So
or is it just blown out because of
if you see
optics?
this line there, that dark line there, and the dark line there, they match. This is old-fashioned glass plates that does not have the sensitivity of our modern CMOS and CCD cameras. So and by the way, this is a single 70-second exposure. This was not stacked. This was just a single exposure that I then stretched. So the sensitivity of all of this, and by the way, that's another galaxy and that's another galaxy, which don't even show up on this plate. But it's just the sensitivity of the sensor compared to the sensitivity of the glass plates back then. I'm sorry for the pun, are night and day different. So that's what you're seeing there. It's just the difference in the exposure. Just the technology has just come so far.
It's kind of like when people correct me when I say, "Oh, the donations because we're a nonprofit keeps the light on," and all the astrophotographers keep the light off because astronomy, light pollution. You don't want that. All right, I saw a question over here.
Is there a maximum time that you can use or for exposure for a
The-
camera in space because you're moving the
Believe-
lens with the
Believe it or not, they used to do exposures for 40 hours on the same glass plate. You take it for 8 hours, you close the plate, the next night you line it back up and you open it back up again. The most important photograph taken by the Hubble spacecraft is called the Hubble Deep Field. The director of Hubble, at the time, this is a bunch of years ago, said, I'm going to pick the darkest spot in the sky, and I'm going to take a picture for 7 days. 7 days. And the Hubble has these these great big weights that span of gyros that keep it oriented. So they took a single exposure that was 7 days long. And this spot in the sky, this little tiny thing that if you would hold your fingers up, is a couple millimeters by a couple millimeters of the sky. That before was never anything there. We'd never seen anything there. That one frame had 1,000 galaxies in it. 1,000. Look it up. Hubble deep space photograph. The astronomer said, "Why are you wasting 7 days of time when we need to do our science?" And the director said, "Because I'm the director, I can do what I want." And that photograph of this empty space revealed 1,000 galaxies. So in answer to your question, they did it for 7 days. So no, in practicality, there's no limit.
You just need to have really nice tracking.
What we do today is we take a lot of very short images and use a computer to mathematically align them and stack them. And normally when you see an image like this of Andromeda, it's somebody that's taken 7 hours exposure and stacked it. Well, I took a 70-second exposure and stretched it. Yes, you can do a whole lot better, but for 70 seconds on a 3-inch diameter telescope, that was pretty good.
All right, we had another question over here.
When Hale was putting everything together for these great big new telescopes, how much was he involved in the design for them?
He was involved in the overall design, but he had teams and teams of engineers working on it. And that alone is worth a whole book. For example, I'm a member of Stellafane up in Vermont, which was founded in 1923 and is the birthplace of amateur astronomy and the birthplace of mirror making. And to become a full member, you have to make your own mirror from a piece of glass. The gentleman who started that, Russell Porter, was hired by Hale, that he was an absolute genius on mechanical design. He could look at a 2D blueprint and draw freehand with a pencil a 3D view of that almost looked like a photograph. He could visualize it in his head. And he did a lot of the design of the mount of it. So Hale came up with the concepts and had engineering background, but he did, other than the high level design, okay, I want it to be 200 inch, here's the specifications, he did not do the actual design. Mark Surrey did this truss of it. He came up, so there was entire teams of engineers, entire companies. General Electric was supposed to be doing the mirror, the fused crows. It was their engineers that did that. They didn't succeed, and then the Cornell engineers did their glass, and they did it their way. So no, he was not. He was very hands-on on the management of everything, what we would today call the project manager. And but the actual detailed engineering, no.
You don't need to know everything if you know how to form the team that has all the pieces you need.
The smartest person in the room is not the one that knows everything, the one that knows where to find the answers.
Which is why I joined here. All right, was there any last-minute questions? Bueller? We didn't even get the crickets today. They kind of all hid with the random windstorm we had. All right, so once again, I want to thank you guys for joining us here and online. Like I said, do check out our website. It has all our upcoming talks. It has links to all our past talks. Those are saved over on our YouTube channel. If you get a chance, do hit those like, follow, subscribe buttons over on YouTube or Twitch. It does help us get the message out to people. One of our goals is to actually bring our love of science and astronomy to as many people as we can. And with that, everyone have a great night, clear skies, and good seeing.
Thank you very much. If you've got any individual questions, I'll stick around for a little bit. Also, I've got pictures of my own observatory if anybody wants to see that.
And online people, I know a couple people were asking, this is the guy who 3D printed his telescope, and he will be doing a talk about 3D printing telescopes.
In, I think 5 weeks. 28th of June.
Yes. But some people had been really interested and requested a talk on that, and this is the guy who does that. So he will be back. And with that, good night.